Today on Up Front, high drama and high stakes in the 2016 election. The sudden death of a Supreme Court justice opens a new front in the race for the White House and the U.S. Senate race in Wisconsin. Next, Democratic candidate Russ Feingold on the prospect of a deadlocked high court. Then the race for Wisconsin Supreme Court. Justice Rebecca Bradley on her campaign and her narrow primary victory. Plus, the Milwaukee lawmaker who says he sees a cover-up at the troubled Lincoln Hill School in central Wisconsin.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. Just when you thought the stakes in the 2016 election couldn't get any higher, they did. Control of the White House, the U.S. Senate, and now, quite possibly, the U.S. Supreme Court. The death of Justice Antonin Scalia last weekend raised the question of who should appoint his replacement, President Obama or his successor. Republicans say it should be the next president and threaten to block an Obama nomination. Wisconsin Republican U.S. Senator Ron Johnson says he agrees that the next president, not President Obama, should nominate Scalia's replacement. Johnson is up for re-election in a heated race with his 2010 opponent, former Democratic Senator Russ Feingold. Will the Supreme Court be a major issue? We're asking the Democratic candidate, Russ Feingold, who is back on the program today. It's good to have you back.
Good to see you again, Mike.
Well, how important is the battle over who should replace Justice Scalia?
It's of enormous importance. Nobody can say this isn't very important. But the reality is the president has a job to do here, and that's to nominate somebody. And the United States Senate has the job of considering that nomination. That's clear in our Constitution. And if we don't do it, what we're going to have is not just a year, but as much as a year and a half with a deadlocked United States Supreme Court, 4-4. And you know, Mike, we already have a deadlocked, gridlocked Congress. The last thing we need is another branch of government deadlocked. So it's irresponsible to not seriously consider a nomination from President Obama.
Republicans say this is a huge appointment. Why not wait, let the people cast their ballots in November, and then do it? Why not?
Because the people cast their ballots 4 years ago for Barack Obama. And under our system of government, the President of the United States, he doesn't just have the right, but the responsibility to put forward a nomination. And the Senate is supposed to advise and consent if they feel it's appropriate. If they don't do this, if they don't do their job, this isn't something that's happening, Mike, a few weeks before the presidential election. This is a whole year. And then if you get into next year with a new president and swearing in a new Congress, it's going to be a year and a half. So it is just wrong to leave decisions all the way from immigration to climate change to voting rights. All of these decisions will be deadlocked and just left up to the lower courts instead of the decisions that the American people are expecting from the Supreme Court.
Would it be a waste of time to hold hearings knowing that Republicans in all likelihood have no interest in confirming an Obama nominee?
Absolutely not. They should hold the hearings. You know, Mike, when I was in the Senate, I was involved on the Judiciary Committee for 4 nominations. In every case, twice under President Obama, twice under President Bush, I was on the committee. And I didn't necessarily like the people that were putting forward, but we did the full hearings. And actually, in all cases, we ended up in an expeditious manner taking up full consideration of it. That's what we should do here. You know, of the 2 candidates for the U.S. Senate, I'm the only one that's ever voted for a Republican nominee for the United States Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. I did that. He wasn't my first choice.
Are you glad you did that?
Look, I have mixed feelings about it. I think it was the right thing to consider it, to not try to block it, and to realize that, look, it was President Bush's choice. And I think he ended up being a guy that at least did a couple of things right, such as upholding the Affordable Care Act. And I played a responsible role. And the reason is this shouldn't be about politics. This shouldn't be about the next election. The incumbent senator is saying that it should be left to the next president. That's not responsible. That's not doing your job. You need to do your job. We don't need more deadlock.
I have you respond to what Republicans say. They say, look, go back to 2007. Here's Senator Schumer in a speech to a group of attorneys saying we should not confirm any more of George W. Bush's nominees unless there are extraordinary circumstances. How is the politics of that really any different than the politics of what we're seeing today?
Chuck Schumer can give a speech if he wants to, but I didn't agree with it. I felt it was a sacred responsibility to consider the president's choices. I met personally with each of the nominees for an hour. I had a chance to question them, and I announced my decision on the nominee when it came out of Judiciary Committee. We didn't play games. Even though it was George Bush's nominees, and even though I don't like a lot of their decisions, we put it beyond politics. And that's what the Republicans should do now. They should do their job on behalf of the American people.
You've been, I think, outspoken over the years about trying to find the balance between national security interests and civil liberties in this country. And I want to ask you about something that's been kind of a big story in the news the last few days, and this is about Apple.
Yeah.
And the head of Apple saying, you know what? We do not want to comply with the government's order for us to unlock the phone of one of the San Bernardino terrorists, that we think that would be unlocking a lot more than one phone. It might affect a lot of our customers, our iPhone users. How do you feel about that? Should the government be able to compel Apple to unlock this phone?
I think the government should be able, in individual cases, with regard to individual phones, be able to do what the Constitution provides for, which is to show probable cause that they need to get at that information. And then the person that has the information will say whether or not they can actually get at it. I heard the head of Apple saying he can't actually get at it. But I don't think it's a good idea for us to compel them to create this backdoor mechanism where everything will be out in the open, that none of us will be able to have any privacy. Guess what? That's a gift to the terrorists if they can get at everything that everybody else has. So there's a process that is there since the beginning of our country where you can ask for a court order saying, look, we need to try to get at this particular phone. I think, of course, that's justified in the case of San Bernardino.
Last Sunday, the head of the CIA said that he thinks an attack or an attempted attack by ISIS on this country, in this country, is inevitable. He didn't say it would succeed, but he thinks they will try to do that. You've been pretty outspoken that you do not think, other than special operations, you don't think American forces should be on the ground in Syria or in places where ISIS controls territory. Do you still stand by that? Senator Johnson says we could have a certain number of American troops over there to stop ISIS once and for all. You do not agree?
Well, that's not going to work. And the lesson of Iraq is that just trying to use ground forces to try to deal with a situation where you don't know what to do the next day after you've taken over the area, it doesn't work. We tried that. It doesn't work. And he's all over the map on how many troops he thinks should go there. What we should be doing is choking these people off. And by the way, there are reports that it might be working. I'm not saying for sure, but there was a great story yesterday that indicated that they're in big trouble, ISIS. They've had to cut the salaries of all their people by half because the oil prices are down. We've been somewhat successful, apparently, in cutting off their finances. We were able to destroy one of their warehouses where they had tons of Iraqi cash that they need for sort of walking around money. There are lots of things we can do to choke them off, and there is good reason to believe that will work. If we send troops in there, that will help them. That will inspire other people to help them. By the way, the beginning of your question was about something that might happen in this country. I support having more resources for the FBI to be able to do more investigations. What happened with San Bernardino, by the way, they weren't inspired by ISIS, they were inspired by Al-Qaeda. What happened there is that people were having an opportunity to do things that were not working. And what happened was the FBI had to shift their resources, and law enforcement had to shift their resources away from a current investigation to go after this San Bernardino investigation. So the answer here is more resources. I don't want to hear again the next time there's a terrorist attack or the possible terrorist attack that the FBI had to take their resources and move it away from another investigation. They need more resources, and I would support that. So there's appropriate actions to do with the region, choke them off at the source, but also making sure that we have proper resources to go after people that might hurt us in this country.
Former Senator Russ Feingold, the Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate. It's good to have you back on the program. We appreciate it. Now tell us what you think. Who should appoint the next Supreme Court justice? You can tell us by liking and sharing Upfront on Facebook. From the U.S. Supreme Court to the state Supreme Court, and what's shaping up to be a tight race for that bench. Next, incumbent Justice Rebecca Bradley with a narrow margin of victory last Tuesday over Judge Joanne Kloppenburg. Is Bradley in for a hard fight for the April election? I'll ask her when Upfront continues.
Upfront with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.